Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into Hemab Therapeutics, a high-risk, high-reward biotech stock that's definitely turning heads right now.
So Hemab Therapeutics, ticker symbol COAG, isn't just your run-of-the-mill biotech startup. They're building a highly specialized platform squarely focused on blood coagulation and bleeding disorders. But here's the kicker. They aren't just making replacement factors. They're going after long-acting, subcutaneous prophylaxis. Basically, they want to stop the bleed before it even starts. It's like fireproofing your house instead of scrambling to find a fire extinguisher when the kitchen is already in flames, right? It's a total paradigm shift in how we handle these dangerous conditions.
And this shift, this is exactly where Hemab's commercial potential really starts to crystallize. Look at the current standard of care for severe bleeding disorders. It's usually heavy on IV treatments, platelet transfusions, recombinant factors, essentially treating an active bleed in hospital or clinic. Hemab is flipping the script. By moving to subcutaneous administration, just a simple injection under the skin, and focusing on proactive prevention, they're handing patients a massive convenience upgrade. Preventing a bleed is just fundamentally more valuable than playing whack-a-mole with active episodes. Plus, economically, an effective prophylactic therapy in this space could easily command premium orphan drug pricing.
The tip of the spear for them is Sutacimig, which you might know as HMB-001. This is a bispecific antibody, meaning it's engineered to do double duty. It targets both endogenous factor 7A and activated platelets through TLT1, basically to crank up thrombin generation right where a clot is forming. The lead indication is Glanzmann thrombocythemia, or GT. Now, GT is incredibly rare, but it causes severe recurrent bleeding. And the absolute key takeaway here? There is currently zero approved prophylactic treatment for GT. Recognizing that massive unmet need, the FDA already handed them Fast Track, Orphan Drug, and Breakthrough Therapy designations. So despite a tiny patient population, that regulatory tailwind gives them an unusually attractive commercial runway. Now, I want you to let this number sink in for a second. 92%. Back in July 2026, Hemab dropped some highly anticipated long-term extension data from 34 patients. For the folks who had previously experienced bleeding, a staggering 92% saw reductions in their treated bleeding rates. When you're dealing with a brutal disorder where younger patients might suffer intense bleeds at least once a week, a 92% reduction isn't just a win on a spreadsheet. That is a massive, life-altering biological signal. Breaking that phase 2 data down a bit more, we're looking at a 62% reduction in the mean annualized treated bleeding rate, specifically for high-intensity bleeds. And it gets better. The low-dose weekly cohort, that showed an 84% reduction. This clinical momentum is basically the launching pad for their biggest near-term catalyst, which is phase 3. They've already successfully nailed down FDA alignment on a phase 3 regimen of 0.2 milligrams per kilogram, dosed just once a week, and they're aiming to kick that off in the second half of 2026. But, let's keep things objective here. Whenever you have a drug designed to aggressively promote clotting, there's essential scientific tension. The reward is obviously improved coagulation, stopping the bleeding. But the risk? Thrombosis. Basically clotting too much or in the wrong places. In phase 2, Hemab did report 3 grade 2 thromboembolic events. Now, management notes these happened in higher exposure cohorts or in patients with multiple risk factors, and they manage them with routine anticoagulation. Still, this delicate balance is going to be the absolute focal point moving forward. Phase 3 has to prove Sutacimig can stop bleeding without introducing an unacceptable thrombosis risk at a larger scale. Okay, let's look at how this story expands beyond just a single condition. Factor 7 deficiency is the second indication they're targeting with Sutacimig. It's another rare inherited bleeding disorder, and they've got a phase 2 study running right now, expecting data late 2026 or early 2027. Why should we care? Because if this mechanism actually works across multiple coagulation disorders, well, the whole narrative shifts. Investors stop seeing Sutacimig as just a niche, one-trick pony and start valuing it as a versatile, platform-style coagulation therapy. That kind of evolution completely rewrites the valuation equation. And while Sutacimig grabs all the headlines, HMB-002 could secretly be their sleeping giant. This one is a monovalent antibody, so a single focused target, aimed at von Willebrand disease. The target population here is vastly larger, roughly 140,000 patients. Instead of replacing the missing factor, HMB-002 actually stabilizes the body's own endogenous von Willebrand factor.
The early phase 1-2 data, super encouraging. We saw dose-dependent increases in both VWF and factor VIII, and honestly, 8 out of 9 evaluable patients had literally 0 treated bleeds during the 28 days post-dosing. Crucially, no thromboembolic events were reported. Now sure, they cautioned the study wasn't formally designed for efficacy, but man, that early signal is undeniable. Looking even further down the pipeline, we stumble on to HMB-003. This is an early-stage preclinical direct plasmin inhibitor, basically a compound that stops blood clots from breaking down, but its initial target takes Hemab totally out of the rare disease space. They're targeting heavy menstrual bleeding, which is estimated to affect about 1 in 3 women. A non-hormonal treatment with intermittent dosing for this, that potential market is colossal. Naturally, since it's preclinical, we shouldn't assign much core valuation to it today, but you should absolutely view this as some incredibly spicy free pipeline optionality for immense long-term upside. All right, let's step away from the science for a sec and talk money, because honestly, their financial reality check is one of Hemab's biggest flexes. Going into Q1 of 2026, they were sitting on about $163.5 million in cash and equivalents. Then they executed their IPO and pulled in a massive $317.2 million in net proceeds. So even with a Q1 cash burn of around $22.7 million, mostly plowed right back into vital R&D, management says this war chest gives them an estimated cash runway stretching all the way into 2029. In the clinical biotech space, having a runway like that, it's an absolute strategic superpower. Because it's that financial armor, Hemab gets to run a very rare 4-step playbook. First, they get to fund their pivotal phase 3 trials totally independently. Second, they can cleanly generate definitive clinical data. Third, assuming positive results, they create massive fundamental value in the stock. And fourth, they can then raise any future commercialization capital from a position of total strength. They completely bypass that toxic doom loop that crushes most small biotechs. You know, the one where they're forced to dilute shareholders right before a major catalyst just to keep the lights on. So the crucial point is how this cash position relates to the valuation. With the IPO haul, Hemab has roughly $480 million in total capital, but trading around $47 a share, the market cap sits at a hefty $2.2 billion. What does that mean for us? It means investors aren't just buying a cheap biotech trading near its cash value. They're already paying roughly $2 billion purely for the pipeline and the future commercial dream. So the valuation absolutely demands clinical success, because a huge chunk of that success is already baked into the stock price. Yet, despite that premium price tag, the institutional ownership profile speaks volumes. We're seeing serious sponsorship from the biotech heavyweights here. FMR holds nearly 8%, Capital International Investors has 7.7%, and Invis-related entities hold over 5%. That validates the trajectory. It proves this isn't just a flash-in-the-pan, retail-driven IPO hype story. The smart money is backing up the truck for this pipeline, even at a $2 billion valuation, because they understand the unique, highly lucrative economics of the rare bleeding market. But hey, we have to look at the downside and objectively weigh the severe risks here. There are 5 primary ones. Number 1 is the obvious threat, phase 3 clinical failure. Simple as that. Great phase 2 data does not guarantee phase 3 success. Number 2 is thromboembolism. If dangerous clotting pops up at scale, the whole thesis crumbles. Number 3, that $2.2 billion valuation we just talked about, it leaves practically 0 room for error. Number 4, keep in mind this company generates exactly 0 product revenue right now, meaning a single clinical stumble will absolutely crater the stock. And finally, number 5, yes, they have a strong runway into 2029, but taking drugs through phase 3 and commercialization is wildly expensive. Long-term dilution or debt is eventually likely. Since traditional metrics like PE ratios are basically useless in clinical biotech, evaluating COT requires a probability-weighted approach. In our bear case, driven by phase 3 disappointment or thrombosis concerns, the stock could easily slide back down to the $15 to $25 range. Now, our base case, where Sutacimig efficacy is confirmed and safety is manageable, puts fair value somewhere between $50 and $70. But the bull case, that's where things get really exciting. If phase 3 is highly compelling, HMB-002 crushes it in von Willebrand disease, and big pharma starts sniffing around for M&A, we could easily see shares rocket into the $80 to $120 plus range. Pulling all this together for our final scorecard, we give pipeline quality a solid 9 out of 10. Clinical momentum gets an 8.5. The balance sheet is a rock-solid 9. Valuation, however, scores a 6 just because so much is already priced in, and the inherent clinical risk level remains a highly elevated 9 out of 10. That brings our overall verdict to an 8.0 out of 10. We rate COAG as a highly speculative buy. It's fundamentally attractive if you've got an aggressive biotech portfolio, but if you're a conservative investor, you probably want to chill on the sidelines until we see definitive phase 3 progress.
At the end of the day, everything we just tore through boils down to one defining question. The debate isn't whether Hemab science is cool. It obviously is. The real question is, can Sutacimig actually convert this incredibly impressive phase 2 biology into a safe, statistically bulletproof phase 3 result, all while navigating a valuation that already demands substantial success? That is the ultimate COG investment debate for the next 12 to 18 months, and it's a storyline you'll absolutely want to keep on your radar. Thanks for hanging out for this explainer.